The sequel to Breath of the Wild has just been announced, and the teaser leaves us with a ton of questions. However, I think I might have an idea as to where the plot is headed. It's a lot of speculation, but I'm also basing this off of not only what we've seen in the trailer, but also the lore from Breath of the Wild, so while I could be completely wrong, I also might be onto something here. Only time will tell, but for now, let me paint you a picture of where I believe the story of the sequel of Breath of the Wild is going to take us. At the end of Breath of the Wild, Zelda mentions to Link that something with Vah Ruta is acting up and they should go investigate and continue to rebuild Hyrule, so let's assume the game starts shortly after that scene. Not too long, but long enough for Zelda to have cut her hair and the two to prepare themselves for another adventure. Link and Zelda visit Vah Ruta, and perhaps this would be a good place to have the tutorial take place, which, by the way, Zelda is with us, so why not make her playable? I know a lot of people have wanted to see that for a long time, and there's already speculation about that, so hey, let's do it. They've technically done this in the past with Spirit Tracks, and having the ability to use two characters in a dungeon could lead to some very interesting puzzles and ways to solve them. Revisiting Vah Ruta would be a good place to introduce that mechanic and get players used to it as well. At the end, perhaps they can meet with King Zora, who can shed some light on what exactly was causing Vah Ruta to act strangely and warn them of some ancient story about a hidden secret under Hyrule Castle or something of the sorts. I'd say this would be a good spot for Mipha to appear, but seeing as how all the champion spirits disappeared at the end of Breath of the Wild, I don't think they'll be coming back. Regardless, the two set off for Hyrule Castle. With no time in between games, the castle's sanctum is still destroyed, and the chamber where Link fought Calamity Ganon is wide open. Zelda and Link search around and eventually find a way to go deeper into the depths below Hyrule Castle. For now, we'll call this area the Crypt. Breath of the Wild actually does make mention of something deep below the sanctum too. The King of Hyrule actually mentions that the Calamity appeared below Hyrule Castle in this cutscene.
But nay. Ganon was cunning, and he responded with a plan beyond our imagining. He appeared from deep below Hyrule Castle, seized control of the Guardians and the Divine Beasts, turned them against us.
From the trailer, it's hard to determine how much of this is going to be playable since, yeah, obviously it's mostly shown in cutscenes. However, I'd like to see the crypt be a larger overworld type puzzle area. Imagine something like the Typhlo Ruins in Breath of the Wild, but it's a crypt and you need to solve puzzles as both Zelda and Link to navigate through correctly. Discovering wall paintings and artifacts along the way that allude to some evil magic or technology that caused the calamities of the past. You can actually see something like that in the trailer, and judging from the design of the wall paintings, it seems like they might be related to the Zoani. If you're not sure what that is or who they are, I don't blame you, it's not exactly explained in game, but more lore can be found in the Breath of the Wild Creating a Champion book. Here it states the Zoani are a tribe that lived in the Faron region. They were skilled in the use of magic, but also described as barbaric. The tribe has ruins all over Hyrule, Faron especially. They're also responsible for the Typhlo Ruin Shrine, which is eclipsed in total darkness. The tribe is said to have suddenly disappeared, and it remains as one of Hyrule's biggest mysteries as to where they went. However, important takeaways of this information are that the Zoani have 1, a connection to shrines in the area and possibly to some extent the Sheikah, and 2, they have telltale markings, one being a dragon and the other being spirals. Oh, and look what we see around the hand holding back Ganon's corpse, a spiral of green energy. Keep in mind that this lore is already put into writing. I know a lot of this information comes from a book outside of the game, but ask yourself this. Why would Nintendo and Eiji Aonuma go through all that effort? Why would they write in lore for the various tribes and people of Hyrule, especially ones that have long since disappeared with only fragments of ruins left behind? Why bother doing all of that if you're not planning on using it at some point or another? I understand the concept of world building, but this seems to be far above and beyond if they didn't plan on bringing this up again somehow. Anyway, the problem is these records are incomplete and missing critical information. Then as you explore, you hear a heartbeat. It gets louder and louder until you get to the center of the crypt where we see Ganondorf's corpse, like in the trailer. It's unclear what events actually happen in the trailer, but what is clear is that Link and Zelda eventually do reach the bottom of the crypt and find Ganon's corpse, and the now infamous glowing green arm. Something happens with the footing and Zelda is the first to fall, We know this because we can see the golden accents of her glove. Link, of course, catches her, but also he seems to fall right after. Link is then saved by the mysterious green arm. This ultimately ends up triggering Ganon's resurrection. We can assume from this that the green hand was holding Ganon back, preventing his full resurrection, and it's clearly friendly to Link because it saved his life, and it's probably also what gave him his new Kamehameha ability. And I think there's a good chance that's what's going to end up replacing the Sheikah Slate this time around. It would make sense for Link to return the slate to Zelda since she was the one who was originally researching it alongside Purah back in the day. Link absorbing the arm would be a decent replacement and allow him to conjure up all sorts of magic and new types of runes to use along his adventure. And here's where it gets interesting. Some of you might be thinking that Ganon or Ganondorf can't exist because in the final battle with Zelda she says he's given up on reincarnation and assumed his pure enraged form. However, it appears this could in fact be a misinterpretation of the translation. Other sources say that the original Japanese seems to contradict this, saying something along the lines of, "This form was born from his obsessive refusal to give up on revival." I know it's not the strongest piece of evidence in the world, but that change in translation completely changes the motivation of Ganon. This absolutely means that he can reincarnate, but Dark Beast Ganon is just a form of pure rage and a last-ditch effort after his Calamity form. So him being able to come back into his normal form wouldn't be anything that different. In fact, it should be expected. And Hyrule Castle ascending into the sky, that's also a result of Ganon's reincarnation. This would end up separating Link and Zelda from each other, and it could split up the Triforce or something. Now, instead of being able to play as both in unison, we're left with just Link. From here on out, reuniting with Zelda would be a primary objective for the player, something to work towards while still allowing the opportunity for a more traditional style game to take place. I love the idea of playing as both Zelda and Link, but I think introducing that concept first, then taking it away shortly after, similar to how Metroid always strips Samus of her powers at the start of the game, is a good way of letting the player see what could be and give them the motivation to find Zelda so they can get back to that point. From the point of separation though, as Link, we can travel the world. It seems like Aonuma is going to be keeping the overworld mostly the same and not changing too much. From the screenshots we've seen, the only thing missing are the Sheikah Towers and shrines, as well as the pillars around Hyrule Castle. The pillars being gone makes sense, since again, if we turn to creating a champion, it says the pillars were actually storage for the Guardians, and with no need for Guardians, I guess they could just retract back into the earth. Same thing for the shrines. The towers, well, that's another story. We know they can be hidden underground from the fact that the very first tower is hidden in the Great Plateau, and the others only appear after you activate it, but I can't think of a reason for them not to be there now. Especially since some of the shrines were uncovered by the Hylians back in the day, so they would still be visible. However, this seems relatively minor, and I think we can kinda overlook it for the time being until we get more information. The rest of the world will probably be mostly the same. While I would absolutely love to see a rebuilt Hyrule, I just don't think we're gonna see it this time around, unfortunately. An alternative that I think would also be cool is if perhaps the evil that spread out when Ganon was resurrected somehow changed some of the climates of the land. Maybe the desert becomes covered in frost, Faerun becomes flooded, Lanayru becomes a desert. I'm not sure, but something that would keep the structure of the world the same, but also make things different enough that it's still fun to explore again. With all that out of the way, let's talk about our main motivations. In this scenario, it should be solving the mystery found in the crypts. If it turns out to be related to the Zoani, great, the groundwork's already there. If not, Nintendo is building up to something, and I think going around the world again to discover hidden ruins and dungeons to go through is good enough motivation for me. Plus, if the Triforce does get split up, we'll need to find it. I think normal dungeons should make a return in, not because I didn't like the Divine Beasts or Shrines, but because I don't see a need for them in this game. It makes more sense for these elements to remain exclusive to the first game, and this game to do something a little bit different. What I do like is the idea of having Link go underground, deep beneath what's already established to find ruins and artifacts left by Hyrule's ancient ancestors. If you think about it, we've had Zelda games take place in the sky, on land, in the sea, and even in alternate dimensions, so underground doesn't seem too crazy all things considered. Here not only can we find fragments of the story and history around Ganon's body, but also upgrades to our arm. And I say upgrades because I want to keep this game as open as possible. Much like the first game, being able to do what you want when you want should be a key feature, and I want to bring that over. In order to do this, our arm will come pre-equipped with everything we'll need to beat the game. However, these dungeons will provide us with optional upgrades to either improve the already existing abilities or give us more options. We can already climb everything in the game world, but what if an optional upgrade was a hookshot-like ability? You wouldn't need this for anything, but getting it would save you a ton of time climbing and exploring, which gives enough value to entice players to want to get them. So then, while exploring and progressing through the game, the story could go a little something like this. Back in the day, the Sheikah and the Zowani were working on experiments that could combine technology and magic. I want to believe they were working on something to make people immortal. However, due to the taboo nature of that subject, the royal family put a stop to it. From here, the relationship between the Sheikah and the Zowani as well as the royal family began to break. The Zowani would go off on their own, and with no one to keep them in check, they would eventually become a barbaric tribe because they ended up messing with magic beyond their control. The Sheikah would split into two factions, those remaining loyal to the royal family, and those who turned against them to form the Yiga clan. The Sheikah would continue working with Magitech though and eventually create the Chamber of Resurrection, a last-ditch security measure to bring someone back to life if they needed it. It would be based off of their immortality experiments, but not designed to keep someone from dying, just to bring them back if they did. After the Yiga clan separated from the royal family, they approached Ganon and told them of the immortality tech that was being developed under Hyrule Castle. And as such, in his never-ending quest for power, Ganon assembles an army and sneaks into Hyrule to steal the tech. He is successful and he tries to make himself immortal, but unfortunately it fails. Instead, his corpse is instantly mummified like we see in the trailer, and he's turned into Calamity Ganon. That's how the first attack from 10,000 years ago started. Calamity Ganon is sealed away using the sealing power, and as an extra precaution, the Sheikah developed the arm to stop Ganondorf from being able to fully reincarnate into a human form, which is exactly why when the hand moves to save Link, it allows Ganondorf the chance to return to the world in that form. Now granted, that last bit is completely speculative and essentially made up. I based it off as much lore as I could, but I'll still admit there's a lot that we don't know. Despite that though, based on the pieces we have and given the darker tones of the game, I don't think a plot like that is too far-fetched. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you think that's a good idea for a plot, or perhaps you've got your own ideas, I'd love to know. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, so if you guys enjoyed this video, a like rating would be greatly appreciated. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. But once again guys, my name is Matt, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.